you ever been in situations or meetings where people are kind of going off on tangents, and they're going on and rambling, and you know, A leads to B, leads to C, and next thing you know, we're like, why are we even talking about this? So there are lots of tips and techniques you can use to try to rein other people back in. One, which is my absolute favorite, is called Elmo. And I will say, again, going back to this woman's point about culture. Now, I'm not gonna whip out Elmo at my client location and say, hey, we're gonna start using Elmo, okay, because they'll think I'm crazy. But this is something that works really, really well with a close-knit group. And the way Elmo works is Elmo stands for everybody, let's move on, okay? And so with my team, we knew we had a problem with rambling. We would get off on tangents and, you know, different topics, and we're beating a dead horse, and we really just kind of need to move on. So our agreement was to use Elmo to kind of help police all of us. So all it does is this. All you do is this. You just put Elmo in the center of the table, and then anybody at any time during the meeting who thinks we need to move on, all you have to do is pick up Elmo. And the reason why it's so great is this. Let's think about it. When people are going off on tangents, or they're beating a dead horse, or they're going on and on and on, it's not like we don't know it. It's not like I'm not rolling my eyes and I'm looking at her and she's rolling her eyes, and we're all just kind of hoping that, I don't know, she's going to run out of breath at some point and we'll have to move on. So the barrier, the problem is you don't want to be rude. Isn't that right? You don't want to feel like you're interrupting. And also, I don't want her hating me. You know, I don't want her getting mad at me because I said we need to move on. So what's great about it is you don't have to interrupt. This way, it's just something physical that you can do. And I promise you, this is what will happen. If you guys talk about it at the beginning of the team and you're in agreement that you're going to use that technique, and we've got a rambler going on over here, all anybody has to do is start reaching towards the doll. And I promise you, she's like, oh, okay, I know we need to move on, okay? So it works really, really well. So think about using a technique like that. Something else you can do is just ask the rambler to kind of summarize. You know, because again, remember, we don't want to be rude. We don't want to say, hey, you know, we need to move on. Okay? But you might say, well, you know what, LaTanya, you're bringing up some really, really great points. I want to be sure we get them captured in the meeting notes. Would you mind just summarizing? What 2 bullets should we put in the meeting notes?
And then she's going to keep going on.
And what's great is that's where we got some other techniques. So we're going to ask her to summarize. And if, like Sonia said, that doesn't work, maybe we'll utilize the parking lot. Has anybody ever heard of the parking lot? Parking lot, very, very simply, you introduce it at the beginning of the meeting and you say, hey, I know that sometimes we can get long-winded or additional issues might come up that aren't on the agenda. If anything like that happens, we're going to use the parking lot. So what will happen is I'll just ask you to jot your point down. We'll put it up on the parking lot, write it on a Post-it, put it up on the parking lot. Then at the end of the meeting, we'll go back to all of our parking lot items. Okay? So that way we're still getting to it, but we're going to get through all of our other business first. And then the last 2 things you can do are just ask the person if you can possibly take it offline. So for example, with LaTanya over here, I'm going to give you 2 different responses to her rambling, and you tell me if you sense a difference. So if she's rambling, kind of going on and on, I could step in and say, well, LaTanya, you know, you're bringing up all these vendor issues, but I just don't think we have time to get into that today, so I just need you to hold that until, you know, maybe the next meeting. That's one approach. Or I could say, LaTanya, you're bringing up some really great issues about these vendor problems. I know we didn't have it on the agenda today. Do you think it's something we need to add to the agenda and discuss now, or should we save it for the next meeting or possibly take it offline?
You asked LaTanya to answer this. Let's talk about it now.
No, wait. I'm gonna get to that in a second. I'm gonna get to that in a second. But the difference between the 2 approaches, what was the difference? Yeah, the way I said it. How did the second one was much better? Do you see how it's a lot less threatening? Why was it less threatening? What was it? There's something very simple that I did, and that's the technique that I'll recommend. Giving her.
Do you think?
I asked her. There's a huge difference between telling somebody to do something and asking them. Okay? And I know I've gotten into arguments with my husband where I told him to do something. He said, you know what? I was going to do it, but just because you told me to do it, now I'm not. So people usually don't like to be told what to do. So if you ask them, if you turn it into a question, it automatically makes it a lot less threatening. So that's one of my key facilitation techniques. Anytime you have something that's really kind of difficult or potentially confrontational, you want to say in a group setting, turn it into a question. It automatically makes it a lot less threatening. Okay? Now with that, I'd say probably 80 to 90% of the time, she's going to say, oh, you know, you're right, let's just hold off until after the meeting, or let's do it at another meeting. But, like she said, maybe LaTanya might put her foot down and say, no, I really do think we need to talk about it. There are two different techniques I can use then. Any ideas? What do you think I might do if she says, no, we really do need to talk about it? I could suggest the parking lot.
Just take it out to the
And no, we're not going to take it out to the parking lot. I got to keep my eye on it. Okay, but there are a couple things I can do. One, I could throw it out to the group. I could say, okay, what does everybody else think about that? Okay. Now, and the reason why I'll say that sometimes that will be effective is because a lot of times when you think somebody's rambling and the group needs to move on, you're not the only one. There are other people who think that as well, okay? Now, if that doesn't work, or if you decide not to do that, there's another technique you can use, and it's called time boxing. So what I would do then is I would say, you know what? I agree, let's spend some time talking about that, but I do want to be sure we have time to get to some of the other items we had on the agenda today. So my recommendation is let's time box it, meaning if I can get someone to pay attention to the clock and let us know when 5 minutes has elapsed. Essentially, I'm going to say, hey, let's spend 5 more minutes on this issue, and then at the end of the 5 minutes, we need to decide what we're going to do about it so we can move forward. Okay? So that way, we're still honoring her request to discuss it, but we're putting some sort of time parameter around it. So we're not just going on and on and on. Okay? So just a few techniques that you can use, not only for you to keep your focus, but to help keep other people focused. Because I don't know about you guys, but this is a big problem in meetings that I sit in organizations that I work with.